This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do every weekday over the airways of ESPN Radio, 250 plus markets across the United States of America, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM, Channel 80. Number to call up as always is 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. When was the last time you checked your credit scores? Know what they are now, not from a year ago, with Credit Karma. They also offer free credit monitoring. Visit creditkarma.com or download the app now. That's Credit Karma, KARMA.com. Time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks. No contracts. Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem in Houston, ladies and gentlemen. I am coming at you live from H-Town, site of Game 5, last night's Game 5, in which the Houston Rockets survived, prospered, and have moved on to Game 6 with a 3-2 lead in this best-of-7 Western Conference Finals series, 48 minutes from a trip to the NBA Finals, courtesy of CP3, who put on an absolute show in the second half with 18 of his 20 points in the game. Courtesy of Eric Gordon, who showed up off the bench and showed out and deserves a lot of credit for that as well. All of those things are things that matter. All of those things are things that we should be paying attention now. Obviously, James Harden didn't have the greatest game, 5 of 21 from the field, 0 for 11 from three-point range. Couldn't buy a basket to save his life, but still did other things and played relatively effectively. But that is not the news to peel from what you witnessed last night. A 98-94 victory over the Golden State Warriors that have put the Houston Rockets up 3-2 in this best of 7 NBA Western Conference Final Series. There's two storylines to pick up. One would be Chris Paul, who I said this morning on my television show First Take that comes on every morning from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time on ESPN. I said Chris Paul shouldn't even be in the facility, shouldn't even be allowed on the team playing. There's no way in hell that Chris Paul with a 3-2 lead should be playing in a Game 6. You've got to save him for Game 7. Because I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that the Houston Rockets are going to beat Golden State in back-to-back games at the Oracle. The fact that you won Game 4, I'm pretty much assured you ain't winning Game 6. With or without Chris Paul. So guess what? You need Chris Paul at his best. You need him as healthy as he can be. You need him ready to go to the best of your ability to get set for Game 7 Monday night. Because they ain't winning Saturday. Not to take anything away from from Houston, because obviously their defense was stellar. They showed up in ball, despite Chris Paul and James Harden combining to shoot 11 of 40 from the field. In the end, what it comes down to is that Houston won the game. They deserve a lot of credit. And a Mike D'Antoni team playing defense, they deserve a lot of credit because they have been all up in and all over the Golden State Warriors. They have made them incredibly uncomfortable. The Warriors don't look comfortable at all. They look a bit rattled, to say the least. When you've got my buddy Mike Greenberg, Greeny, as we affectionately call him, one of the nicest human beings in this business, if not on the planet Earth, when you have him saying there's a choke job taking place before our very eyes, you got a problem. You got a problem. You don't hear that very, very often coming out of the mouth of Mr. Mike Greenberg. That's just not something he does. So the fact that he would be willing to say something like that, of all people, tells you all you need to know about what you're seeing from Golden State, which brings me, ladies and gentlemen, to the biggest problem going on right now. Biggest problem going on right now. We could sit up there and we could dance around this. We could talk all we want to talk about the Warriors collectively and how they were supposed to be this super team and how the Houston Rockets are one win away from advancing to the NBA Finals. We can talk all of that stuff. Hell, you could even bring up Steph Curry. He's a two-time league MVP. He's the greatest shooter we've ever seen. Yet Steph Curry, 8 of 17 last night for 22 points. Just hit 2 of 8 from three-point range. Steph Curry looked relatively pedestrian last night. There was nothing to really write home about. You know why that happened, ladies and gentlemen? Because they turned Steph Curry into a 2-point scorer. They sat up there and said, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us by getting to the basket. You're going to beat us by hitting layups or floaters in the lane or whatever the case may be. We are not going to stay out here and just let you launch away from 3-point range. We ain't having it. That much is true. Obviously, the Golden State Warriors did not have Andre Iguodala. And as a result, they were a bit challenged because Jordan Bell had to get 14 minutes because of his absence. David West had to get 11 minutes because of his absence. Quinn Cook, who ended up taking a pivotal shot that he couldn't drain yesterday. I like the kid. He's got promise, but he's young. Shouldn't have been in that position. He gave you 8 minutes last night. You had to play him. Sean Livingston got 17 minutes. I personally think he should be playing more. And after how horrid and pathetic Nick Young looked in his 12 minutes of action in Game 4 when they were hoping to give him 20 to 25. He didn't get any minutes last night. All because Andre Iguodala's out. All of those things are things that you have to adjust to. So we understand and recognize that the Golden State Warriors have their challenges. But allow me to say this to you, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to get this off my chest right now. If you thought for 1 second the person coming into this series that had the most pressure on them, more pressure in the world than anybody on their shoulders was James Harden, I'm here to tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, in an official capacity, that has changed. I don't give a damn about James Harden's 5 for 21 performance and 0 for 11 from 3-point range, which is the most threes missed without hitting one that has occurred in NBA playoff history outside of John Starks with the Knicks against these Houston Rockets in 1994 in the NBA Finals. I think it was 95. I'm sorry. What I'm saying to y'all is this. You can look at all of those storylines. You can look at anything you want. Here's what it comes down to. Kevin Durant is on the hot seat. It is flaming. You slice it any way you want to. This is what it is. We're going to pull off the gloves for this one. We're going to stop playing around and acting like we don't know what the hell is going on. I called for H-Town to stand up. H-Town, stand up. Game 4, they did it. Game 5, they did it. This is after a 41-point blowout loss in Game 3, by the way. And H-Town stood up. The Rockets stood up. Their home crowd last night stood up. Everybody was tremendous. This is Game 6 back at the Oracle, and then ultimately a Game 7 back here at the Toyota Center in H-Town. Let me tell you right now, I don't know if there has been a hotter seat in years, hotter than a hot seat that Kevin Durant is on right now. Oh, my Lord. It don't get much hotter than this. It might get hotter, not much hotter. You're one of the top 3 players on the planet Earth. Kevin Durant is a career 27-point-per-game scorer on nearly 50% shooting. The first 2 games of this series, he was averaging 37.5 on 55% shooting. Kevin Durant can ball. Kevin Durant is nothing short of a superstar. Kevin Durant is one of the top 3 players in the world. Kevin Durant is the reigning NBA Finals MVP. He is a former league MVP. He has been to the finals twice in his career. He has been to numerous conference finals in his career. He's getting over $300 million in endorsements. He's getting over $27 to $30 million in salary. He's due to get a max deal that'll pay him over $200 million in salary. You left Oklahoma City for Golden State after being up 3-1 in the Western Conference Finals, only to lose 3 straight, wet the bed in Game 6, show up too late in Game 7, lose to Golden State, watch them win the championship over the next 3 weeks, and then a week after that, you joined them. And when you joined them, you left the residue behind, aimed squarely in the direction of Russell Westbrook because everybody and their mother assumed you were saying, I can't win with Russell Westbrook. So you skate through the playoffs last year. No resistance whatsoever. And we all know it. Let's not argue about this. Don't tick me off. Don't get on my last nerve by acting like this was not an issue. Don't do it. I don't want to hear it. Let's not act like we don't know. Last year, when Golden State went 67-15, following a 73-9 season, in which they lost the Game 7 in an NBA Finals because they were up 3-1, and they ultimately lost to LeBron in Cleveland because the league gave the Cavaliers a stimulus package by suspending Draymond Green in that Game 5 back at the Oracle after Golden State had won Game 4. And then Draymond is suspended. And then in the same game that he suspended, Iguodala and Andrew Bogut, your rim protector, both got hurt. Don't talk to me about it. I'm not going there. But I will tell you this. After that season, they acquired Kevin Durant. You come back, and in Kevin Durant's first season in Golden State, they win 67 games. Not only do they win 67 games, they sweep Portland in the first round. They sweep Utah in the second round. They sweep San Antonio. After Kawhi got low-bridged by Zaza Pachulia in Game 1 when they were down 23. They win that game and then sweep San Antonio. And before an NBA Finals game even takes place, here's LeBron James, the winner of the Eastern Conference in Boston last year, being interviewed, I think it was by Doris Burke, and asked about going up against the Golden State Warriors. And before a game was played in the Finals, LeBron James says, quote, "I don't even want to think about that right now. I'm just trying to enjoy this moment. I don't even want to stress myself and ruin the moment by thinking about what I got to go up against by having to play them." You conceded defeat before a game was played. So that wasn't any real competition for you. And as a result, the Cleveland Cavaliers ended up losing in 5 games. So you swept Portland, you swept Utah, you swept the Kawhi Leonard-less San Antonio Spurs, and then you beat Cleveland. There was no adversity for Kevin Durant last year. There was no duress. The whole damn season was a honeymoon. All of it. We fast forward to this year. Houston acquires CP3. CP3 is in H-Town with James Harden. And with James Harden, CP3, and Clint Capella all on the floor at the same time, their record was 50-5 with each other. And still you had people saying, Golden State is the better team. Golden State should win this series. And then the series is tied 1-1. Golden State wins Game 1. Houston wins Game 2. Game 3, they go to the Oracle. Steph Curry, who shot 2 for 13 from three-point range in the first 2 games. All the focus is on him because Kevin Durant is averaging 37.5 on 55% shooting at that particular juncture. All the focus is on Steph Curry. And Steph Curry goes berserk. Drops 35, raining threes from all over the place. Golden State ends up winning by 41. Blowing Houston out of the building to the point where everybody was like, damn. Are they going to win another game? I don't even know if they're going to win another game. You have folks within the Houston Rockets organization that was questioning it. I would know this. I spoke to them. Folks were that nervous. But then they shocked the world because they come and they win Game 4. And ladies and gentlemen, they end up winning in Game 5. And now they've taken a 3-2 series lead. But what's lost in the shuffle of all of this? Kevin Durant, fourth quarter of Game 3, fourth quarter of Game 4, fourth quarter of Game 5. Kevin Durant has gone 1 for 9 for 2 points, 0 for 5 shooting from three-point range in the fourth quarter of these last 2 conference finals games. You ain't got Russell Westbrook to look at now, do you? Game 4, Kevin Durant was 1 for 5 in the fourth quarter. He actually had 6 points in the fourth quarter of Game 4. So just 1 for 9, 0 for 5 from three-point range. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. This is one of the greatest players in the world. And I'm not going to sit up there and go through my regular song and dance about great guy, great basketball ambassador, all because he is. He's a great person. I'm tired of all of that. Enough of the prefaces. Enough of all of this stuff. We're talking basketball. He's got to show up. You can't show up in the fourth quarter like that. Not when you're that great. This is on the line. There ain't no way around this. Kevin Durant's got to show up. You know why he's got to show up, ladies and gentlemen? He's got to show up because of LeBron James. Now, what do I mean by that? It's very, very simple. If this were LeBron James, what would we be saying about him? What would we do? We would be all over him like white on rice. And you know it. That's why Jamie Foxx called into the radio show a couple of days ago. He said after Game 4, Stephen A., wait a minute, Stephen A. Had that been LeBron James that didn't show up in the fourth quarter, what would you have done? What would y'all have done? The great Jamie Foxx was right. We'd have been all over LeBron. So if you are KD and you are coming for LeBron and you are knocking on those doorsteps and you are challenging him for supremacy in the league, not just as a champion, but as the number one talent. No disrespect to Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard, who are in those conversations when healthy. The bottom line is you have to be held to the same level of accountability and scrutiny. It's only fair and it's only right. Now, Kevin Durant, to his credit, did have something to say last night, talking about how they'll be ready for Saturday's game. Listen to what Kevin Durant had to say.
Yeah, we got another game at home, Game 6. Still confident, you know. We had some opportunities to win this game, last 2 games, and we didn't close it out. But we can learn from it, and, you know, we got another opportunity at home on Saturday, and we'll be ready to play.
I don't want to hear that from him. I don't want to hear the word we. We know it's a team game. We know you can't do it by yourself. We know that, guess what, Steph Curry and everybody else, they got to show up too. Would have been nice if Steve Kerr would have made sure somebody found Klay Thompson in the fourth quarter. He was the only one hitting shots from the perimeter. Would have been nice. But that's neither here nor there. This is about you, Kevin Durant. It's about you. It's a big moment for him. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the last 2 fourth quarters have highlighted how incredibly nice we have always been to Kevin Durant. Think about it. The only time he's received any scrutiny is when he decided to leave Oklahoma City for the Golden State Warriors. Other than that, Kevin Durant hasn't received any scrutiny throughout his career. Got the commercials going, making the money, superstar, widely recognized, and deservedly so. But you got to show up in the fourth quarter. This is unacceptable. Now the season's on the line. The reigning, defending NBA champions with 4 All-Stars and 3 of arguably the top shooters in the history of basketball that we have seen together are on the brink of elimination. Kevin Durant, 1 for 9, 0 for 5 from three-point range in the last 2 fourth quarters of a Western Conference Finals. You got to show up. Plain and simple. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. We'll talk about that. We'll also get into whether or not tonight is going to be LeBron James' last game in front of the Cleveland Cavaliers fans as the face and the star of that franchise. Could this be it? Will he extend, push this to Game 7 and ultimately win that series and go to the finals? Or will LeBron James leave the Cavaliers and just go on his merry way for new horizons? All that, plus some NFL talk about these protests and about the NFL's new rule in regard to the national anthem, what people have said about it. The great noted sociologist, Professor Emeritus at UC Berkeley, an historian, civil rights, and beyond, the great Dr. Harry Edwards will be up with us with hour number 2. So we got a full-packed show coming your way today. But I got a lot of stuff to get to about last night's Western Conference Finals Game 5, along with this Eastern Conference Finals Game 6 tonight in Cleveland at the Q. So stick around. Don't touch that dial. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Bobby. Bobby, the basketball boy, they called him. Bobby wanted to go pro someday, so he was always out in the driveway shooting hoops. But one day, his mom came out and told him,
"Hey, your wife wants you to take out the trash."
His mom was visiting, and Bobby was a grown man. He had kind of missed his window. Plus, no one had ever seen him actually make a basket. But on the other hand, Bobby had heard how Geico could save him money on car insurance, so he switched and saved. So it was all good.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
You know, one of the things that I wanted to point out, you know, as you watch the Golden State Warriors, as my producer, Nuno Texiera, was pointing out, you know, there's something missing. And a lot of people can't put their finger on it, but I can. See, watching this series is exactly why I'll never put LeBron over MJ. Because even though he has nothing to do with this series typifies the era we're living in. Those Phoenix Suns that made noise, being credited with revolutionizing the game of basketball because of Mike D'Antoni's offensive mindedness and what have you, with their 7 seconds or less getting a shot off and stuff like that. John, what was that number? They were 19th, but what was it? What's the category it was in terms of pace of play? I mean, these are the kind of things that we're talking about here. Average pace. The Phoenix Suns were number 1, okay, in 2004, 2005. Mike D'Antoni's team, Houston Rockets, they were ranked 19th, meaning the Phoenix Suns back then, a 98.6% pace or 98.6 pace. That pace right now that had the Phoenix Suns number 1 in 2004, 2005, that same number right now would be number 19. The Pelicans would play at a greater pace. Even today's Phoenix Suns would play at a better pace. The Lakers, the 76ers, the Warriors all play at a better pace, at a faster pace than that Phoenix Suns team from 2004, 2005. So when you think about how the game has evolved, what we once thought was extraordinary is now vacillating between normal and mediocre compared to today's modern day game. The game has sped up. It's considerably softer. And Golden State is going against the Houston Rockets team that won't give them any air to breathe. They are all up in their mug. Now, it's not with the same physicality that was allowed back in the day, but it's physical, and it's made Golden State uncomfortable. You know why? Because it's foreign compared to what you normally see on a night in, night out basis in today's NBA. So if that's what Golden State goes against, it's what LeBron goes against. And if what LeBron goes against, it clearly isn't what MJ had to go against. So the level of competition that you had to go up against and the physicality that was allowed and the tactics that were employed to inhibit and limit you from what you wanted to do is why you don't mention guys from this era compared to guys in the previous era, the Jordan era. LeBron is not Jordan. He's great. He's many things. He's on a Mount Rushmore of basketball forever and a day. He's no Michael Jordan. That's the reason why. He ain't had those bad boy Pistons and them Boston Celtics to go through. Pay attention. Pay attention. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. JP in Brooklyn. The floor is yours, my brother. What's up?
Stephen A., how you doing, Brody?
I'm good, man. Talk to me.
Stephen, 90% of the stuff you put on air, I agree with you 100%. You know, I love when you talk because you speak the truth. But this situation, Stephen A., I can't agree with you on KD. You
Please.
have the best scorer in the world.
Right.
You have the best shooter in the world.
Right.
Now, you need one shot to take you over the top. Who do you give it to, Stephen?
I'm going to tell you why it wouldn't be Steph Curry. Are you ready, JP?
That's what happened last night. It's Steph Curry took that shot.
Well,
and KD went to Steph Curry. Did you see that? He went to Steph Curry. Yo, what we going to do? Steph said, I'm taking a shot. And Steph took that shot and missed.
All right, JP. You and I have been talking a while, right? I know you know your sports and I know you know your basketball, okay? Tell me the one player on the court that is in a mismatch every time he touches the ball.
You're right, KD. But
go ahead.
It could be argued that Steph Curry is a mismatch. I mean,
that can't be argued. That's not true, JP. You know that just because he's the greatest shooter in the world, and he is. Just because he's the greatest shooter in the world doesn't mean that he's a mismatch. It just means that his shot is extraordinary. But he's not a mismatch. He doesn't have a height or a physical advantage and a skill set advantage over everybody he faces every time he touches the ball. That's not true.
But, Steven, ever since KD came to Golden State, it's a different type of team. You know, at first they used to always move the ball around. People was always open. Now, you know, whenever KD get the ball, you know, the ball stops with KD and he's trying to score. It's a different team now. And, you know, and that's a problem. I think that's a problem. And that's why, you know, they're struggling with Houston. That's exactly why they're struggling with Houston. You know, KD is, you know, sometimes indecisive. He's taking too long. You see Steve Kerr telling him, move the ball, find your offense, find your shots within the offense. They're not doing that. You know, KD, he looks like, dare I say, Carmelo Anthony when he was with the Knicks. Whenever the ball gets to him, the ball
What I'm saying to you, JP, you're explaining it. I'm saying to you, nobody is devoid of that level of comprehension. The problem is that it's unacceptable. You are the guy that left Russell Westbrook. You are the guy that left Russell Westbrook and left us all with the residue of an impression that you couldn't win with Russell Westbrook. You go to Golden State. You're in the ideal system with the ideal teammates. You win a championship. You win NBA Finals MVP. But it was a cakewalk. You had no competition last year. Not in Portland, not in Utah, not in the Kawhi Leonard-less San Antonio Spurs team, and certainly not in the Cleveland Cavaliers. So now here you are in year 2, and your first real level of duress arrives. And for some reason, we can't find you in the fourth quarter? You don't have a problem with that, JP? I'm shocked. I'm shocked that you, of all people, would not have a problem with that.
I see that there's a struggle, a power struggle on that team. Who's going to take the shot when you need a shot?
But I'm saying to you that if you have the ball in your hands, at the end of the day, it's your call. And I'm like, listen, man, we watched Kevin Durant give up the ball to Cook one game. We watched him give up the ball to Klay Thompson. We watched last night where he asked, what we going to do to Steph Curry as opposed to telling him, get me the ball. I can't believe that you, of all people, JP, didn't pick up on that.
Whose show is this? It's your show or is it my show?
It's my show.
It's the Stephen A.
And I picked up on it.
Exactly. Now, whose team is that? Is it Steph Curry's team or is it KD's team?
Well, guess what? You can say that, but it's 1 and 1A, bro. That's the whole point. They needed KD. It wasn't KD asking to come to Golden State. They went to the Hamptons to recruit KD to come. What are you talking about?
When Shaq recruited Karl Malone to come to the Lakers, whose team was it?
Oh, Karl Malone was beyond his prime. Come on, bro. JP, I gotta go, but that's a bad example. But good try, though. Good try. I applaud the effort. Thanks a lot, my brother. I appreciate you. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. We got to get back to more of those calls. I love that call by JP, by the way. Number to call up as always is 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Back with your calls and more on the Western Conference Finals. There's an Eastern Conference Finals tonight with LeBron James on the brink of elimination. If the Boston Celtics knock off LeBron James, will that be even worse for him to lose to this team as opposed to if he had lost to Kyrie Irving on the court with the Boston Celtics? Just thinking about it. Thought I'd ask. More to Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio in a minute.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. Reminding you, hour number 2, the great Dr. Harry Edwards will be on the show with us. Let's go to Carlton in Tampa. You're live with Stephen A. What's up, Carlton?
I'm worried about you, my friend. You are infected with what I am going to label, as of today, the millennial mindset. And Max and Molly have this in spades. They can't, they've been completely taken over by a long shot. And this is the same mindset that is the reason why some people are anti-LeBron and why it's just got to be absolutely miserable to be on LeBron James's team. Today, Max talked about how if LeBron loses tonight, independent of how he plays, it's LeBron was a superhero and he just didn't have enough help. These motley crew that's around him just didn't contribute enough. Of course, if he wins, all the credit goes to LeBron. So can you imagine being on the Cleveland Cavaliers and listening to your show today and hearing that, wait a second, if we lose, it's all our fault, and if somehow the Cleveland Cavaliers come back and win this darn series, all the credit goes to LeBron. This is a part and parcel of everybody getting a trophy. It's never anybody's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. It's racism. It's misogynism. It's the Russians. It's always somebody else's fault in this millennial mindset. Max has never once pointed out that LeBron has 19 turnovers in his 3 losses, while the whole Celtics team only has 22.
That's
LeBron's
true.
coughing the ball up.
He's never pointed that out. But when you talk about the millennial mindset, here's the reality of the situation. LeBron is the best in the world, but he's not perfect, and he certainly can be. There are certainly things to point out about him, which I believe I have done. I don't understand what your gripe is.
You rarely, every once in a while you do throw out, well, he actually does have to get back on defense. But you still really don't blame him for the losses. Stephen A., they were playing 5-on-4.
I think the team stinks, number one. Number two, I don't want him in the finals because I don't want to hear the narrative that you're alluding to. Look at how this great, great guy carried this team to the finals. He never had a chance. I don't want that. I want a competitive final with no excuses. And that's not going to happen with LeBron.
The reality is he's only stepped up to the plate twice, the 2 home games. Those were the games where from the jump he decided, I'm actually going to play when the other team has the ball. The other 3 games, he's chopping at the ref and they're playing 5-on-4. And he's turning the ball over left and right. And he doesn't get any criticism. Why? Because, he'll put up his high 20-something points and he'll have, 8 or 10 rebounds or something like that. But he gets almost no criticism for the fact that he's turning the ball over left and right and he's playing no defense. That is literally the entire reason why every game has gone the way that it went. When he decides to show up, he wins. When he doesn't decide to show up, they lose. And so to blame everybody else on his team is just lunacy.
Carlton, you and I are going to have to respectfully disagree. When you have a starting backcourt that gets outscored 41-3 in a game, and a starting backcourt where your shooting guard has scored in double digits twice in the series, all right, or you're scoring 9 points as a starting backcourt, that's a problem. I get what you're saying, and I appreciate the call. I get what you're saying, Carlton. I totally get it. But in the end, what it comes down to is that the Cleveland Cavaliers are not very good. Now, you can make the argument that LeBron has something to do with that because Jordan Clarkson was averaging 15 a game, and Rodney Hood put up 17 a night, and they come to Cleveland, and they look like they don't even belong in the league. Why? Because LeBron James is holding the ball most of the time, and that might be taken away from dudes. You can make that argument, and certainly LeBron can be held accountable for that. But it's clear he's not working with much. Let's just call it what it is. More in the conference finals, plus the NFL anthem protest in the NFL. Dr. Harry Edwards up next.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Washing my nose, oh yeah.
I'm a shower curtain, and I do one thing. Keep water from leaking everywhere. So you see why I feel useless compared to Geico, who does so much more. Like, not only could Geico save you money, but they've been around for over 75 years. And they give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or on the Geico app. And they've got a 97% customer satisfaction rating. They do all this while I have to listen to this chucklehead. Oh, good, he stopped.
Washing my toes.
Oh, great, an encore.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show. It is my honor and privilege to have my next guest on the line, somebody that I reach out to continuously to be educated about the things I do not know, which means I talk to him quite often, by the way. He is the great one himself, historian, professor emeritus at UC Berkeley, former consultant to the San Francisco 49ers. I think he might still be doing that. Lord knows what else he's doing. He's always active, a pillar within the African-American community and beyond. The one and only Dr. Harry Edwards is on the line with yours truly. Doctor, how are you, sir? How's everything?
Well, as usual, I'm doing better than I deserve, but I'm still on this side of the lawn, so I'm fine.
I got you. You heard the news come down about the NFL and what they've decided to do in terms of making sure that players who elected to kneel during the national anthem, it would not be allowed. If they did that, any team personnel or league personnel for that matter, not just the players, but obviously the players themselves, they would be fined, subjected to additional penalties by individual teams as well. But they also had the choice to stay inside the locker room until the national anthem was played, and then they could come out thereafter. Your reaction when you heard that ruling come down?
Well, first of all, I've been around the NFL for 31 years. I've been a consultant with the 49ers for 31 years. I've also been a consultant with the NBA and worked with the Golden State Warriors for 10 years and have spoken to the team on a couple of occasions, even over the last year. Of all of the experiences that I've had, this is probably the dumbest move that I've ever seen a league make in terms of this type of issue. First of all, it's consistent with an extended, ongoing perception in American society that black people are not creditable witnesses to their own experiences or speakers to their own motives and intents. And so for the commissioner to stand up and impose on this situation a definition of targeted action that involves disrespect for the flag, the soldiers, and the anthem is an absolute unadulterated lie. I think Roger knew that when he said it. There's not a single athlete that I've talked to, and I've talked to most of the protesting athletes, including Michael Bennett, most certainly Eric Reed, and Colin Kaepernick. Not one athlete has ever said, I'm protesting the flag, the anthem, or against our soldiers. Mm-hmm. It has always been a protest in the name of justice. And what they're saying is that we're better than 348 black men, women, and children being shot down by police in this country since Kaepernick first sat down in protest of that level of injustice. Roger knows that, but yet he stood up there, mouthed the words of the extreme pathological right, and made this an issue of patriotism. That's the first issue. We are not creditable witnesses to our own experiences, motives, and intents as far as American society is concerned. The second thing is that they've taken an issue that was targeted outside of the arena and made it a football issue. This was about injustice in society. They have now made it an issue between owners and players, between coaches and players, and even between players themselves when some players want to take the field and stand for the anthem, and others want to stay in the locker room. They've also put a spotlight, bigger than ever, on the protesters, because what is going to happen is everybody's going to be waiting for those athletes who choose not to come to the field to run out onto the field. It's going to be like Hail to the Chief being played before the president enters the congressional chamber during the State of the Union address. That's what happened with Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, when he didn't stand for the national anthem as an NBA player. They put him in a locker room, and after about 4 games, there was only one thing that the anthem had any meaning in terms of, and that was just before Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf ran onto the court. They put a bigger spotlight on the protest than ever before. So this whole thing is a disaster. It's coming apart. People are coming out now and saying there was no official vote. It was much less a unanimous vote.
It was informal. There were hands that were raised. At least 2 owners abstained. Jed York for San Francisco and Mark Davis for the Oakland Raiders. They abstained, and everything was an informal vote. It was no official vote, sir. No official vote. Yeah, there was no official vote. There's no official definition of what constitutes a protest. So if a player raises the fist, is that player's team going to be fined? If a player simply walks out during the national anthem, is that a protest? Is that player going to be fined? Suppose players lock arms. Are those players going to be fined? And what about a groundskeeper who's trying to cover up a mole hole before the kickoff, which comes immediately after the anthem? If he's down on a knee trying to cover up a mole hole, is that player going to be fined? And what about the 65 or 70 people who belong to franchise, who are affiliated with the franchise, who are taking care of various business around the stadium during the course of the playing of the national anthem? Who's keeping an eye on them? Who even knows who they are on every team? So this thing is a fiasco. The notion that these players are protesting the national anthem or protesting the flag or demonstrating against the soldiers is a bald-faced, unadulterated lie. We all know that's a bold-faced lie. We all know that's a bold-faced lie. But you specifically, Dr. Harry Edwards, you specifically mentioned the commissioner. I'm thinking about the 30 to 32 owners, or 32 owners to be specific, that he has to answer to, that used him as a conduit to speak on their behalf. This is the conclusion that they come to. You mentioned the commissioner. The Players Association is in an uproar. A.Smith and those guys have spoken out against it, but they had a problem because they thought they were guaranteed by Roger that there were no changes that would be made, but essentially it was left the impression he didn't want to do this. His hand was forced by the owners. To that, you say what?
Well, I think that there's no question. Look, Roger's a decent guy. I know him. I talk to him. We exchange phone calls all the time. I know him very well. He's an eminently decent guy. He's in a situation where he has to herd cats and skunks, and every now and then he gets sprayed, and when he comes before the microphone, the stench is on him. He knows that these athletes are not protesting the flag, the soldiers, and the anthem, but he stood there and said that, mouthing word for word what the pathological liar in the Oval Office has said. So at the end of the day, he's in a tough situation, but that's why they pay him $44 million a year. He has to figure a way where he can do what's in the best interest of the game. He had the option to do nothing. The whole protest movement was fading. And what this move did was to put it on life support, hang an adrenaline drip into it, and by the time the season starts, you're going to have, if they're lucky, chaos If not, you're going to have a uniform rebellion against this by players across the league, and the fines will be meaningless because they will have created a spotlight for protest.
We're talking to the great Dr. Harry Edwards right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Dr. Edwards, you and I speak periodically, and I'm always enlightened, and I always appreciate the counsel and the education you provide me. I'll play devil's advocate, however, in this particular sequence. When we're talking about the National Football League, what do you say to the argument that if you're an NFL owner, the protest were not necessarily against you? It was a protest addressing the ails of our society right now, particularly as it pertains to minority communities and specifically African-American communities throughout the United States of America. And as a result of that, because it wasn't the problem of the National Football League, why should the National Football League stand idly by and do nothing while their bottom line is compromised because of protests that were not even aimed at them? What does Dr. Harry Edwards and others say to that?
Put it in a collective bargaining agreement.
What do you mean, sir? What do you mean, sir?
And at a minimum, don't take a protest that was focused beyond the arena and make it a football issue, which is what they've done. Put it in a collective bargaining agreement. Get with the Players Association.
Put what in a collective bargaining agreement? Just to be
that you cannot reference anything, stage any type of response or protest or in support of anything that is not directly an aspect of the mission and so forth of the football organization. Put it in a collective bargaining agreement. Put it in a collective, but don't go through and select the protest, which is, and say you can't do this, and this disqualifies you and constitutes a finable offense of protesting the summary execution in some instances of black men, women, and children in the black community, and in other communities of this kind of thing happening in other communities of color. We can't stand for that, but at the same time, you can stand for rapists to be brought back into the game. They don't take a poll to see if they want to bring somebody back into the game who's been beaten on a woman. Right. They don't take a poll to see if somebody who's been murdering mutts should be brought back into the game. They don't take a poll to see if even owners who are under various clouds involving sexual misconduct should be kept as owners.
Former owner of the Carolina Panthers, Mr. Jimmy Richardson, being the latest example of that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, at least at a minimum, be consistent. If you have a strong league-wide feeling about protest, about anything that is references outside activities, actions, injustice, and so forth being represented on the field on game day, then put it in a collective bargaining agreement. Get with the players, but don't come out of the blue in response to some political disposition going down in Washington, D.C., and use the exact same words and say, this is an insult to the anthem, the flag, and the soldiers, and we have to put an end to it.
Dr. Harry Edwards, what disgusts you more? Listen to my multiple choice here. I want to know what's at the top of your list of what disgusts you more. Is it the reality that the President of the United States hijacked the issue of the protests addressing racial oppression, racial inequality, police brutality, etc., and turned it into an issue of patriotism? Is it the cowardice or whatever other word you want to come up with as it pertains to the owners and the commissioners and the commissioner himself in addressing this issue? Or is it the fact that these owners and the commissioner never went to the players to actually do what you just suggested, discuss with them and implement it into the collective bargaining agreement? Of those three examples that I gave you, what disgusts you most?
Well, I'm not surprised at anything that happens coming out of the Oval Office, and I'm not surprised about the level of, for lack of a better word, stupidity of some of the owners. What I do expect is a more intelligent approach and response to the situation in the interest of the game. And so I think the thing that I have the greatest difficulty with is the fact that there would not be an orchestrated effort from the commissioner's office to get with the Players Association, especially since the movement was fading anyway, and say, hey, let's put something together that allows us to intelligently manage this, because there are pressures to reinforce, side with, back, validate some political interests that have nothing to do with the task at hand for us. That is the minimum that I would have expected coming out of New York, but that didn't happen. The other thing that I would say is this: is that the fans, the people have to be smarter. I'm shocked and surprised, for example, at the disposition of people toward the quote pardoning of Jack Johnson, another cynical, self-serving, degenerate act. Right. Jack, you don't pardon the victim; you pardon the criminal. You apologize profusely to the victim and provide reparations where it is practical. So I could see a president apologizing profusely to Jack Johnson
for him being incarcerated for 10 months. You know, basically for an interracial consensual interracial relationship.
The Justice Department and the police agencies that collaborated with the Justice Department to hound this man for 9 years all the way to Europe and then put him in jail for 10 months in 2020, those are the criminals. But when you pardon the victim, you create a situation, one, which is inappropriate, but two, you quiet all discussion of the real criminal and the crime perpetrated in many instances, which are still going on today, black people being hounded and incarcerated and in prison and so forth, who are innocent. So at the end of the day, we have to be smarter. If we accept this thing, for example, about pardoning Jack Johnson, who they going to pardon next? Emmett Till? Yeah. Who they going to pardon next? The 4 little girls who died in that church bombing? They're going to pardon Medgar Evers? We have to be smarter as a people and as a population, and not get caught up in this. So there are even some black people saying, well, I understand what the commissioner is saying. The protests have nothing to do with football. That's very shallow thinking.
No, well, you know what? I'm guilty of that to some degree because I've said that. Not that I accept it, because I know that the president hijacked the issue and I'm disgusted by it. But my mentality is that the reality is that unfortunately he pulled it off. So I deferred. Yeah. Like yesterday, I deferred to an article that you wrote where you called on the players to think beyond the protest. And I'd like you to, because I was using that as, you know, metaphorically speaking, I was just alluding to it to say, hey, he's right. And you have to think beyond the protest because the president already pulled off the heist of hijacking the issue and turning it into something that it absolutely was not about, which is patriotism. So Dr. Harry Edwards writing an article calling for the players to do something beyond protesting, to think beyond those specific protests is what I thought was a brilliant idea. Please explain that.
Well, this was prior to the league turning it into a football issue.
Right.
This was when it was an issue that targeted developments and issues beyond the arena. And so the fact that at that point that Trump had hijacked what was already a fading protest movement was irrelevant. Because Trump wouldn't have anything to point to except athletes out in the community, working with community leaders, getting police departments along with community activists and organizers and mayors and council people and pastors around the table to discuss the issue. If he wanted to point to that, then good. I'm glad, because I want to see that publicized. But they would have taken away what it was that he was trying to dangle as a shining object in front of his base to show that he was still fighting the racist fight. So the article that I wrote was in reference to a point before the owners turned this into a football issue. An issue having to do with contradictions and conflicts within the arena between coaches and players, between owners and players, between different sectors of political disposition in the locker room among players. This is where this thing has broken south and to the right, and now we have to deal with that. Are the athletes settled enough, smart enough, intuitive enough at this point to say, okay, let's take it all off the table? We're not going to protest in the arena. We know that they have gotten the message. When Dr. Edwards goes and gives a lecture and asks how many people are uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable with the protest, 3/4 of the hands go up. And then he turns around and asks how many of you would trade places with African Americans. Not a single white hand goes up. That tells you they got the message. They know what's going on. So now the issue is, what are we going to do about it? Let's just take it all off the table.
Dr. Harry Edwards right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Before I let you go, let me ask you this question. Do you think the media has an obligation to report on which players do not come out of the locker room for the anthem, considering what we're talking about here?
I don't know whether they have an obligation or not, but I know they're going to. They're going to have a list of the athletes who are not coming out. The camera's going to be on the athletes who run out of the locker room after the anthem. And if an athlete has a back injury or something like that he has to get massaged right up until the last moment so it doesn't stiffen up on him and he's a starter like a quarterback or a corner, all of a sudden the question is going to be, well, was he protesting or did he have an injury? Now the team has to come out and say, well, our starting quarterback has a back problem that we have to loosen up right up until the last minute. And the first time that gets out, the opposing team is going to say, hey, let's test that back. Let's hit him a couple of times right out the chute. So this thing is going to become complicated. I don't know whether the media has an obligation, but I know what they're going to do. And they're going to put a spotlight on the players who are running out.
And the thing that's bad about it, Doc, is that I'm looking at it from the perspective that, first of all, you're going to have a spotlight on those who are coming out, just like you just said. As a result, the issue is not going to fade away because you know it's not going to fade away because of that very, very reality. The animus from those who are opposed to these guys to begin with in the protest is going to grow. It's going to swell. And oh, by the way, I think it's going to cause division within the ranks because you're going to have players who stay behind. You're going to have other players who do go out for the national anthem, and they're not going to be on the same page. And who's to say how that's going to affect all of us? To that,
and
you say what?
You got to divide it. You got a divided locker room. So at the end of the day, this is one that could have been avoided. You had a fading movement. All the league had to do was, hey, sometimes the best policy is no policy at all. Let's do nothing. Let's focus instead on moving from protests to policies, programs, and progress, and let this thing go away. And let's also send a letter to the Oval Office advising one specific person, let us run the NFL. You run the government, because given the job that you're doing, I don't know what you're doing watching football anyway. So, I mean, at the end of the day, there are all kinds of ways that this could have been handled. And it was not, and I lay that directly at the feet of the commissioner and the owners. It didn't have to become this chaotic or this bad.
I know you've dealt with a lot of frustrations, a lot of things that have disappointed you throughout the years, but considering your multiple decade relationship with the National Football League and what you've witnessed from these owners and this commissioner who you obviously respect and are fond of to some degree, where does that leave you, sir, in terms of, from an emotional perspective, from having to deal with these individuals moving forward, knowing that they'll reach out to you for counsel and beyond? Where does that leave you?
To be available, to continue to do the work that's necessary to clarify the issues and talk about the options and let it be known that this struggle is perpetual, that it's dynamic, and there are no final victories. We're going to have to figure out a way to manage this situation and come out of it better. And let me say one other thing.
Yes, sir.
We've gone through all of this as a society before. We've gone through much worse. than what's going on in D.C. now. We went through a civil war and we came out of it better. We went through a bloody labor movement and we came out of it better. We went through a women's movement before and we came out of it better. We went through a civil rights movement that killed more people in this country by a factor of 3 than the 9/11 terrorist attack on the towers. And we came out of it better. We're going to come out of this better because that's what we, the people, do. We continue to struggle. We go back and pick up the pieces. We reorganize, and we come out of it better. We're going to come out of this better.
I would love to leave that to be the last word, but I'd be remiss in neglecting to ask you before I let you go. In light of the ruling, in light of what's coming down based off the mouth of the commissioner, should Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed have jobs in the NFL within the next week?
Well, it's gotten to the place now that they're martyrs. And it'd be like somebody asking, what difference would it make if they had given Rosa Parks her seat back? The thing had gotten so much bigger than that, it wasn't even. It's almost a laughable kind of gesture. But at the end of the day, of course, they should be working in the NFL if they have the capability of making a team. And what I've suggested is that all protesting athletes should be in camp when it opens. At the start of the preseason, whether or not they're on the regular season roster, that's a football issue, but they most certainly should be in camp. So, yeah, I hope that Eric Reed and Kaepernick are in camp in August. That would be a step in the right direction, but it's not going to resolve the issue.
And you said that if they're not there, you said the players should protest before a preseason game?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, should people in Montgomery, Alabama have protested because Rosa Parks didn't have her seat back? I mean, at some point, the issue is so much bigger than that. What the NFL has done is to open this up to a challenge involving fundamental basic principles of adhering to the collective bargaining agreement, freedom of speech, athletes' rights, and so forth and so on. It would be great, but I would not advocate that athletes protest for Cap and Eric to get their jobs back. That's a part of a much larger and more important issue concerning athletes' rights and so forth in the wake of this shoddy, cobbled together nonsense that was enunciated by the commissioner.
Dr. Harry, it was always an honor and privilege to have you on the show. You know that. Deeply appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend all of this time with me. Thank you so much, buddy. Have a great day.
Thank you. Keep the conversation going.
You know it. The one and only Dr. Harry Edwards right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. A lot of stuff he said there. All of it made sense. All of it. Whether you agree or disagree, can't deny how sensible it was, because he always does make sense. We'll get back to that in the conference finals in the NBA. Stick around. Don't touch that dial. You're listening live to Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Craving even more of Stephen A?
Him of all people!
For around-the-clock access to the man?
I'm Stephen A.
You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Stephen A. Smith and on Facebook at Stephen A.
Washing my nose, oh yeah.
I'm a shower curtain, and I do one thing. Keep water from leaking everywhere. So you see why I feel useless compared to Geico, who does so much more. Like, not only could Geico save you money, but they've been around for over 75 years. And they give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or on the Geico app. And they've got a 97% customer satisfaction rating. They do all this while I have to listen to this chucklehead. Oh, good, he stopped.
Washing my toes.
Oh, great, an encore.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Chris Paul is out for Game 6 because of that right hamstring injury he suffered in the last minute. As a result, Golden State opened as a 10.5-point favorite in Game 6 at several sports books. But after Paul was ruled out, the Warriors were listed as high as 12-point favorites over the Rockets. Golden State remains a small favorite, minus 130 to win the series, which means Vegas believes that Golden State will go into Game 7, into Houston rather, and win Game 7. H-Town, where I'm at right now. They think the Golden State Warriors are coming back for Game 7 and will beat the Houston Rockets Monday night. So it's a foregone conclusion in everybody's eyes that Houston is losing Game 6. Including myself. Maybe that's the best chance Houston has. Nobody's expecting anything from them. Deontay and Cali, you're live with Stephen A. Talk to me.
Yeah, Stephen A., I just wanted to comment on the whole national anthem protest. I think it, not even too little too late, the wrong thing, but especially too late. I feel like Roger Goodell is an average commissioner at best. He's not proactive. He's not revolutionary. I feel like when they got the contract from the DOD to have all of the pageantry before the games surrounding the national anthem and things like that, that's when something should have been put into the CBA, like Dr. Edwards suggested, to let it be known that this is the type of thing that we're going to do as employees of these professional football teams, as employees of the NFL, that we're going to stem.
Well, stop right there, Deontay. Stop right there. Deontay, that's the reason why the NBA is not having any problems. Because the NBA had a rule in place stipulating to the players that this is what we do when the national anthem is being played, period. So because the rule was in place and the players signed on to it, there was no issue, no pushback from the Players Association led by Michelle Roberts and Chris Paul, because they knew what the rule was. Now, it didn't stop them from locking arms and showing unity and sensitivity to the issues while still not violating the rules that the NBA had in place, not to mention by not offending the patrons who patronize your product. The NFL's biggest problem is that they never had a rule in place that they had negotiated with the Players Association, as Dr. Harry Edwards pointed out, that wasn't in the collective bargaining agreement. So you open the floodgates, because in the end, what makes America look so bad, Deontay, is that Colin Kaepernick never violated any bylaws. He never did anything wrong. You just don't like, not you, but folks just don't like it and are not realizing that they're doing a disservice to the American way of life by ostracizing this man who violated no laws and exercised exactly the rights that we want American citizens to have, and they're holding it against them. They don't even realize it.
Exactly. I could have not said it better myself, Stephen A. Smith. And just for you, my name is actually Dante, not Deontay. I figured that a man of your caliber would like to know that information. But I would just like to ask you, Stephen A., seeing that this ruling came out, I believe that it's going to really blow up in the NFL's face and the owner's face and Commissioner Goodell's face. And later in the season, when this becomes bigger of a problem than it was before this hearing out, I'd like to ask you, if you were an NFL owner, and on the flip side, if you were Commissioner Goodell, what type of actions would you sort of plan on taking in order to, for lack of a better term,
Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? I would do what I was told Jerry Jones essentially did, believe it or not, because obviously I feel differently than he does about the president and how the president hijacked the issue. But having said all of that, I would do what he did. He called his team into a meeting. He let them know this is a business meeting. This is not about football. Articulated to them how the bottom line was being compromised by all of this. and basically said to them, if my bottom line is going to be compromised, your bottom line is going to be compromised. So you might want to think about what you want to do. That's what I would do if I were an owner. That's how it is.
That's a very good point. I wish that's what it. And I would like to talk about one last thing.
Hurry up.
I completely agree with what you said about the Sterling Brown issue. I think it is abhorrent what happened. You said that you want the names of those officers. I do too. You said that you want to know specifically what the disciplinary actions were. I do too. But even furthermore, my issue is this. This happened in January, correct? And we finally got the footage, about a week before Memorial Day.
Yeah, hurry up. Go ahead.
What is up with that? Why can't we
I don't know. That's a different question that I'm ill-equipped to answer, and I don't have the time to right now anyway. But, Dante, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. 888-SAY-ESPN. Your calls to close out the show in a minute. You're listening live to Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! 888-SAY-ESPN. Let's get to the calls. Let's go to Pedro in L.A. You're live with Stephen A. Real quick, Pedro, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Stephen A.? First-time caller.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I woke up this morning, and I see that Chris Paul is out for Game 6, and most likely he's not going to be 100% or near it for Game 7. But when are people going to start talking about the worst catching all these breaks? The first year, no Kevin Love, no Kyrie. They go against Dellavedova and LeBron, easy dub. Second year, you can say what you want about Draymond getting suspended. They still choked on their home court in Game 7. And then year 3, Kawhi goes down. He was slicing and dicing them like a sushi chef. They were looking to lose that game. Who knows what happened? And then this year, CP3 goes down. Are you
finished? Are you finished? Because last time I checked, they're still down 3-2 in this series. This would be a more appropriate call next Tuesday, not now. Goodbye. Let's go to Mel in Queens. You're live with Stephen A. What's up?
Yo, what's going on? In regards to your question as far as LeBron, if he lost to Boston, I think it would be worse if he lost to Boston right now. If they had Kyrie Irving, especially not knowing what Tatum would be. Now we're seeing what Tatum was, but just imagine if we didn't know what Tatum would end up being. They had Kyrie Irving, he lost. If he loses to Boston right now, I don't think it's a black mark on his resume, his career, or anything like that. Because everybody agrees.
Well, I agree with that. I guess what I'm saying is, if he had lost to Kyrie, that's all anybody would have remembered. Kyrie, the year after he leaves Cleveland and goes to Boston, he stops a 7-year run to the NBA Finals for LeBron James. Puts it to a halt the second he gets somewhere else, because that would have been a blemish on LeBron's career, not just because LeBron would have lost to Kyrie, but then it would have got you thinking as to the one championship LeBron got with Kyrie. And you would have said, you see, couldn't live without the kid, should have appreciated him. So he's actually lucky he's not playing Kyrie right now the way they've looked against Boston.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And not only that, what do you think about, the Cavs getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals without Kyrie, and Boston getting to the Eastern Conference Finals without Kyrie?
I'm more impressed with Boston. LeBron James is the best player in the world, so we understand that it's the Eastern Conference, and Indiana was puppies. Toronto was in over their heads because LeBron is their kryptonite, and you saw what you saw now. I got to run, but I appreciate the call. Bombo in Charlotte, you're live with Stephen A. What's up?
What's going on, Stephen A? Just want to say first, I enjoyed Dr. Harry. Definitely an insightful gentleman. But I want to talk about Steve Kerr and the fact that last night he ran at least 10 guys on and off that court. And I feel like that's definitely a detriment to how this team's performing. He needs to shorten that roster. And giving a guy like Jordan Bell over 18 minutes in that game, they were attacking him each and every time they had an opportunity. And I don't think guys like that have any playoff pedigree to be given that type of
Well, I think, I don't, wait a minute. I don't think it was about playoff pedigree. I don't think it was about that. I think it was about desperation. Because you didn't have Andre Iguodala, you're trying to fill those minutes defensively 1 minute, offensively another. Houston's throwing different matchups out there because they know Andre Iguodala is not out there. Those kind of things. It was an aberration because that's not something Steve Kerr would normally do. He just felt like he had no choice. Just didn't work.
So what do you think next game? Should they shorten that roster, or should they still go?
I think that once Iguodala comes back, you'll see them go no deeper than 8 deep. But I got to run. I appreciate the call. By the way, the NBA Western Conference Finals are on ESPN Radio. Tune in for Game 6 tomorrow night as Durant and the Warriors host Harden and the Rockets, live from the Oracle in Oakland, California. Presented by Indeed. Coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. Game 6 is tomorrow night. There will be a Game 7 Monday night in H-Town, and I'll be here. Make no mistake about it. I don't know whether or not LeBron will be playing past this weekend. If he doesn't, it was a nice run. Personally speaking, even though I picked Cleveland to win, I'm hoping Boston does because I'm tired of seeing LeBron in this finals. Not with this team. I'll holler at y'all Monday. Until then, peace and love. Have a wonderful week.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Next, you're holding up the line, ma'am.
What did you say?
You're next in line for the water slide, ma'am. Feet forward and enjoy the ride.
Okay, dearie. This does look fun. You melted me. I've melted.
The Wicked Witch of the West on a water slide? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
See what you've done. Oh!
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.